Now, 8 of the world's leading financial powers are attending the 2013 G8 summit in Northern Ireland this week. The summit is said to be dominated by Syrian conflict and central bank talks. Earlier, UK Prime Minister David Cameron said he hoped the G8 nations would focus on finding common ground on the issues of bringing peace. The two-day summit is also expected to focus on global economic issues. Meanwhile, as leaders of the world's largest economies converge, it's hoped they'll accelerate progress toward achieving food security in Africa. This follows a partnership launched last year between the leaders, private sectors and African leaders. CCTV's Trevor Mbija reports.
Food security in Africa remains a major challenge as a majority of the African population continues to rely on agriculture as its main source of income. Last year, G8 leaders, private sector and African leaders launched a joint initiative aimed at lifting 50 million people out of poverty by the year 2022. The initiative could transform and strengthen food security in participating countries. Countries which are set to benefit from this program, if implemented well, include Ethiopia, Tanzania, Cote d'Ivoire and Mozambique. Other countries like Nigeria, Benin and Malawi are also said to have signed up. It's been argued that more investment in agriculture is key to food security in Africa. The G8, in partnership with Africa states, are optimistic that their goals to increase responsible domestic and foreign private investments in Africa will be achieved. There is also need for donor countries and private sector to increase their support for small-scale farmers. Through this, the farmers will be able to lift themselves out of poverty and in the process meet the food needs of the developing world for many years to come. For the past 12 months, 91% of the G8 government's commitments have been disbursed on time, and more than half of the private sector investments have also started. Trevor Mbija, CCTV.
Now, for more on the G8 summit, we're joined in studio by Osane Kute. He's an African governance specialist. And we also speak to Richard Bestek, who is standing by in Belfast. Richard, let's begin with you. While we know Syria dominated discussions on Monday, there are also African leaders attending the summit. Is there a specific agenda for the continent?
Well, the critical issue facing the G8 and impacting on the African continent is, of course, the 3 T's brought to the G8 by David Cameron, the British Prime Minister. He's very keen on moving this. Basically, tax, transparency and trade. Now, it is the transparency of the taxation system which would benefit Africa most. This is the significant development. It will prevent, by revealing the real companies, the illegal or unscrupulous movement of money. Now, Kofi Annan, who heads up the Africa Progress panel, says that twice as much money leaves Africa every year than goes into it in aid, and a lot of that cash is illegal or hot. Transparency will help tie it down, so he sees a big benefit in Africa if they can make tax transparency works. The intriguing thing here is that for the first time in 40 years of the G8 meeting, this is the first time they've actually tried to attack this problem, a problem of their own making, and of course a particularly malign problem according to watchdog agencies like the charities that are attacking this kind of thing. However, as much as the members of the G8 are friends, they're also business rivals, and making this work will need to have all of them on board.
All right, Richard, we'll leave it there with you for the moment. Thanks for your time this evening. Let's move to Mr. Kute, who's in studio with us. As we said earlier, he's an African governance specialist. Mr. Kute, looking at the G8 summit, you've got 8 of 11 of the world's wealthiest countries. They represent only 14% of the globe's population. How exactly is this going to affect Africa? How does Africa matter to the summit?
Well, actually, Africa, in my view, matters to the summit in that the G8 leaders are quite interested in Africa because of the natural resources that Africa actually has. But as far as Africa is concerned, I don't think it really matters to the African people, as it were, because it's like asking if, say, 8 leaders of some villages within, a given country are meeting, then how does it matter to a given leadership of a certain village?
Now, looking at the African presence at the G8 summit, you've got South Africa with a guest presence there. Is this something that you expect to change, especially when it comes to looking at plans to fight the rise of militancy in Africa? Will Africa be able to contribute to that discussion?
Well, going by what the African leaders discussed in the AU, then I don't see the African leaders really discussing meaningfully anything to do with combating the rise of militancy in Africa, because it's actually the leaders themselves who actually contribute towards that militancy. Because once the leadership, people take leadership positions in Africa, they then actually turn into despots. So I don't really see them really contributing much towards combating militancy in Africa.
So then, Mr. Kute, what is the plan there? Because President Obama has said he wants to look at peace, and that's globally. How is he going to put any plan and implement that, put any plan into place if you don't necessarily have cooperation or participation from African leaders who you say themselves are also responsible for this rise in militancy?
Well, actually, if you look at what the President Obama is talking about, he himself actually needs to be talking about peace in Syria before he starts talking about peace in Africa. Because you cannot really be holding guns on people's heads and saying that I want peace, and yet you're the one who really wants to arm certain people to fight. I think we need to really change the way we look at the world so that peace can prevail in the entire world.
Now, we've looked at Africa's participation, or rather lack thereof. How is it that the continent would ever be in a position to possibly resolve its own problems? Would they welcome international assistance, or would it be looked at as interference, especially in light of this G8 summit?
Well, actually, I think African leaders must, step back and ask themselves, what do they need to do for Africans? We have enough natural resources in Africa that can solve all the problems that Africa has. And all the G8 summits that we've had before, they've discussed certain things that Africans themselves can actually, solve, such as, famine and diseases. Those are things that we don't need an international community to come and help Africans. We should actually sit down as Africans and sort out those problems using our natural resources.
Right, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time this evening. We're speaking to Mr. Osano Kute, an African governance specialist. Now, it's been nearly 2 weeks since the explosive revelations by former CIA employee Edward Snowden. Outrage and controversy steadily ramped up since, with more information being disclosed and Snowden going into hiding. Hong Kong Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying says the Snowden case will be handled according to local laws. While Snowden's location remains unconfirmed, the United States is expected to ask Hong Kong to hand him over for trial. President Barack Obama is to defend the recently leaked U.S. surveillance program at the G8 summit. He's to explain to the other leaders its importance in fighting terrorism and data protection measures taken. As more details of the PRISM program are released, the incident's reach has moved into the diplomatic field. German Chancellor Angela Merkel, among other leaders, has voiced complaints and asked the U.S. Justice Department to respond to their questions about the program. Meanwhile, a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Hua Chunying, has refuted speculation that Snowden was a spy working for China.
We believe the United States should pay attention to the international community's concerns and demands and give the international community the necessary explanation.
Well, it's time now for a quick break. We'll be back just after this.
Breaking news. Global trends. CCTV News brings you stories with the different aspects of Africa in the international content. With our reporters across Africa and all over the world, we'll tell you about the real Africa and how it impacts the world. Africa Live, every day, only on CCTV News.
As former South African President Nelson Mandela spent a 10th day in hospital, his wife, Graça Machel, issued a moving statement thanking people around the world for their support. She says the love and generosity of South Africans, Africans across the continent, and thousands more from across the world lightened the burden of her family's anxiety, bringing them love, comfort and hope.
Mrs. Machel, who is the only woman in the world to have married 2 presidents, quoted Nelson Mandela, saying what counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is what difference we have made in the lives of others. She said she'd thought of his words each time the world had stood with him, making a difference in his healing. And here in the Eastern Cape, people said they were happy to hear reports from the Mandela family and the South African presidency that Nelson Mandela has been responding to treatment in the past few days. Some of the elders in Mandela's birthplace, Mvezo, say Madiba has to recover from his recurring lung infection because his people here in the rural Eastern Cape and the rest of the world would be lost without him.
My heart is cry for the Mandela. Now I'm got pain in my heart because the Mandela is sleeping on the hospital now.
Mandela, I don't want to die, to go down. Because Mandela was born here, his grandfather, brothers and all come here and feel bad because we proud about Mandela.
And Apiwe Mbengashi says she and her friends will never forget the love and kindness Nelson Mandela had showered on the children of his boyhood village Tunu and surrounding villages, like the Biki village she grew up in. They have special childhood memories of the annual Mandela Christmas party, when they celebrated with food and gifts.
He meant a lot to me. He has done so much for us here in Biki location. On December, he gave us toys, everything. So he meant a lot to us. Those days were very beautiful.
The God, you must bless the Mandela. You must get life. You must come to give the Mandela the long life. The long life of the Mandela, because what? The Mandela is the man of the world.
Renette Alcam, CCTV, Mvezo.
Now, for more details on Nelson Mandela's health, let's cross to Guy Henderson, who is in Pretoria. Guy, we've seen tributes continue to pour in from the report from Renee, and it looks like the family's really taking them to heart. I understand they've been out to read some of the messages on Monday that have been displayed in Pretoria.
Yeah, it's almost hard to believe, really, that no more than 6 months ago, family tended to be whisked in through the back door of a hospital that officials sometimes went to great lengths to keep secret from the public. On Monday, literally just here behind me, initially just a couple of Nelson Mandela's relatives wandered out almost unnoticed, I think just to test the waters, followed but then shortly afterwards by a wider group of relatives who have, through the last 10 days, been keeping a vigil at Mr. Mandela's bedside. Now, they walked out right in front of the world's media and the cameras that ran across the road as they walked out, really just to read a few of the messages and some of the gifts and well wishes that have been sent and left here on this wall outside the hospital in Pretoria. They then picked up a few of those cards and a bunch of flowers and walked back in. But before they went, one of the granddaughters, Swati Mandela, was asked how Nelson Mandela was doing, to which she replied very well. So, and of course, just an hour or so before that, as Renee had reported, Graça Machel also sending well wishes and thanking a very worried world who have, of course, been sending in their well wishes as well. So the signs are positive, more well wishes coming from all around the world and from the family themselves. And I think really just echoing words that Jacob Zuma said just a few days ago, in which when he said that South Africans are very happy to share Madiba with the world.
Now, Guy, looking at some of the family members coming out of the hospital today, that really is quite a departure from how the Mandelas have interacted with the media, especially in the last few days. Would you say that is a clear indication that Mr. Mandela is sincerely improving? And I know on Sunday, when we last spoke, you had said it's too early to look at a possible discharge from the hospital.
Well, I think at this stage it's very difficult to tell. My only source, unfortunately, is the rumour mill. I think probably built more on circumstantial evidence, because certainly, as you say, in the last few days, all of the messages coming from the presidency and then in the latter half of last week and into this week from the family as well, they are positive tones. He is responding to treatment and he is beginning to recover well. So based on that evidence, you might think, well, maybe it won't be too long until he is allowed to go home. This is his 10th day in hospital. The last time he suffered a recurrence of this lung infection, he spent 8 days in hospital. But remember that this time his condition was described for the first time as serious, and in fact is still being described as serious. So it may be that they do keep him on as a precaution. He is, of course, 94, and suffering as he has as a recurrence of this condition, he has, I think, made it through against the odds. I think we'll probably only know whether he is released either when we see a convoy with an ambulance amongst it leaving this hospital in the next few days, or very possibly not even then. Perhaps we'll only hear it when the presidency themselves release a statement saying that he has now been returned home.
All right, Guy, thank you very much for your time. It's Guy Henderson there, live from Pretoria. Now, Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi announced on Saturday that his country is cutting diplomatic ties with Syria. The remarks came as part of a conservative Sunni conference encouraging jihad on Syria to support the Syrian opposition. CCTV's Adil Marouki reports.
Another firing statement from Egypt's President Mohamed Morsi. But this time, Morsi's attention left Ethiopia and directed his words to Syria.
We have decided from today to completely cut ties with Syria and shut down the Syrian regime embassy in Cairo. We will also call back the Egyptian commissioner from Damascus.
Egyptian jihadists organized this conference, urging people to fight with the opposition in Syria. A puritanical cleric who spoke before Morsi described President Bashar al-Assad's Alawite sects as infidels. Morsi's words and the conference escalation against Shiites were quickly extinguished when on Sunday the army announced that it will not be lured or used in any regional conflict.
Calling for jihad is now an Islamic obligation, whether in Syria, Palestine or anywhere else. This is the weapon that only exists for Muslims. It is our aspiration. We need this tone during the current days.
Egypt and Morsi support the Syrian people. We must all stand together now after the Shiite conspiracy on the Syrian people. Hezbollah, that once resisted Israel and we all supported, is now killing the Syrian people, and its sectarian nature has appeared.
The conference on Syria ended providing nothing but supporting phrases to the Syrian opposition. On the other hand, opposition powers in Cairo said the cause was utilized to reflect support for the president against their plans to mark his inauguration anniversary with wide protests. Egypt's relation with Syria has been already at the lowest level, after both countries withdrew their ambassadors months ago.
Morsi stressed that Egypt is still seeking a political solution for the Syrian crisis. But while he had the last word in the conference, he didn't reject the cleric's calls for jihad in Syria against Shiites, which could be considered an approval for fueling sectarian war in the region. Adil Mahroui, CCTV, Cairo.
AfricaLive returns after this break with more, including:
you need to have government where these private investments cannot reach.
Leaders urged to show commitment to end extreme poverty by 2030.
Africa, an amazing world, is coming closer to us. A new voice.
We have made an excellent beginning.
A new view. Let's watch together. We deliver news and views. Let's explore together. We get you inside real Africa. Every day, only on CCTV News.
Welcome back. A 2013 UN report by a panel of experts states that world leaders must show a commitment to end extreme poverty by 2030. The recommendations of the report that have been presented to UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon include ensuring food security to empower girls and women, as well as providing education. In Uganda, poverty experts say that while the country's economy is seeing growth, only a few people are benefiting. CCTV's Isabel Nakiria has the story.
Just outside the capital, Kampala, sits a slum called Kinawataka, built alongside a railway line. Here, a small group of women making a living by picking used straws from among the garbage to weave mats, bags, and many other accessories. The founder of the group, Benedicta Nanyonga, says her retirement package from the central bank was not much, which prompted her to begin the initiative.
And when I left 2001, there was no income for me apart from getting assistance from my children. Sometimes they could give me some money, 200, 100,000. Sometimes they could say, "Mommy, things are not easy."
The straws are soaked in detergents and washed before being pressed to straighten them for the weaving process to begin. But this is problematic. The pressing process is done using a knife, causing a lot of pain to the women's fingers. It's also very slow and tedious, making it difficult to meet targets. Nanyonga bought a straw pressing machine from India with the help of the Uganda Export Promotion Board. But the machine was not effective and she now has a backlog of orders.
I have another order from US, 10,000 shopping bags. I have another order from UK, 20 shopping bags. And then local business women, they want our product. But we don't have the capacity.
Finding a suitable straw pressing machine has been a setback for the group of women. But Nanyonga has already trained over 700 women countrywide to help them come out of poverty, despite not having a machine to help them grow their market. She has won several awards too. But these are just a few of groups of ordinary Ugandans who are trying to make ends meet. Almost 70% of the people here depend on agriculture and live on less than $1 a day. Experts say Uganda is seeing growth in telecoms, housing and banking, but that the government needs to invest more in projects like Nanyonga's and those in the agriculture, because foreign investors prefer less risk, like the telecom sector.
Now, investments in this sector is good, but you need to have government where these private investments cannot reach. And the best example is agriculture. So if you have 70% of the population engaged in agriculture, but the funding for this sector is not commensurate with the people that are engaged in this sector, then you have a problem of growth with exclusion.
A 2013 UN report has set 2030 as the deadline for world leaders to end extreme poverty. The report recommends halving poverty levels by 2030 by ensuring food security as well as access to clean water and sanitation. It also advises creating equitable growth by slowing deforestation and reducing food waste. Nwagaba says groups like Nanyonga's and agricultural groups should have access to finance from cooperatives.
Yeah, so if you have agriculture insurance, agriculture financing through either Agricultural Development Bank, like just we have in China. China has the 4th largest bank in the world. And how do they use these assets? Through listing on the stock exchange. And people bought shares And this is the greatest financial deepening I've ever seen.
Nwagaba welcomes the report but says while economies like Uganda are growing, individuals still cannot afford to put food on the table. Neither can they afford to take their children to school or even access clean drinking water. Nwagaba says governments need to look to those that are very poor and support initiatives like Nanyonga's. Initiatives like these have helped hundreds of women in Uganda to become self-reliant. These women said they are capable of meeting both the local and international markets. But to achieve this, they say the government needs to fund the project. Isabel Nakiria, CCTV, Kampala.
The World Health Organization's called on countries to obtain 100% of their blood supplies and products from voluntary unpaid blood donors by 2020. In Somalia, where blood donations are usually urgent given the country's regular bomb and mortar attacks, doctors and paramedics are appealing to donors to come forward more regularly to help save lives.
On June 14th every year, countries around the world celebrate World Blood Donor Day. Somalia marked the Blood Donor Day on June 15th this year. In an event that was meant to raise awareness on the need for safe blood and encourage volunteer and paid blood donors, paramedics marched in red t-shirts with the translated message, "Give the gift of life, donate blood."
We marked the Blood Donor Day to sensitize our people to donate blood and understand that there is real need to donate blood voluntarily. Most times, Mogadishu residents are not ready to make voluntary blood donations. People only make donations for their family members.
Mogadishu hospitals need blood products to cope with a huge number of casualties of sporadic explosions and mortar attacks. The city has, however, no adequate supply of safe blood to serve recurrent emergencies. Many patients requiring life-saving transfusion do not have timely access to safe blood.
Our country is prone to conflicts. We need blood for injured brothers and sisters, for mothers and children too. My message is, let's move to the nearest hospital and donate blood. Let us save lives.
The best donation one could ever give is a gift of blood. It is life-saving. It doesn't hurt to donate blood, and it saves the life of maybe a mother or a child in urgent need of blood.
Doctors and paramedics therefore made urgent calls while marking the Blood Donor Day for adequate supply through regular donations. Most patients in Somalia rely only on family donations. Mohamed Hirmoge, CCTV, Mogadishu.